watching Rogers TV.
Welcome to Third Eye View. Great to be back for another season. My guest tonight is my favorite doctor, Dr. Colette Harman, who is a naturopathic doctor. Colette, welcome back to the show. It's always wonderful to have you on as a guest.
Well, thank you so much, Lynn. I always enjoy being on Third Eye View, so thank you for inviting me back.
You're welcome. Now, one of the things that I want to talk about, because I do actually read some of your posts on Facebook. Some of it, I look at the topic, and then you've got all of these things I can't see properly on the phone, the different links and that. So I figured, well, I'll just get her on the show and we can talk about it, and then I'll find out. But you had put one on about sugar. And I know sugar is not good for you. I am one of these weak-willed people who is desperately addicted to sugar. So I figure I'll have you on, talk about it, scare me enough that that's it, drop it.
Well, I am a recovering sugar addict. I cannot have much sugar before the cravings kick in, and I just go crazy with consuming sugar. So, and when I say sugar, I'm talking about that white stuff. Mm-hmm. Dare I say white death? The white stuff, the refined stuff that is often added to all the processed foods we eat. Yeah. Not only just things that are sweet like candies, cookies, cakes, pies, etc., but it's added. Sugar is added into just about everything that's ultra processed. And when I talk about ultra processed food, I'm referring to food that you can't make in the kitchen, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to make cheesies in the kitchen. It's hard to make, many
if
things.
I could find a recipe to make them without sugar.
I know. Yeah, it's hard to make Nutella in the kitchen. So, but what I'm saying is, sugar is in so many foods. And the reason why I suggest strongly that people look at, if they can't eliminate sugar from their diet completely, at least to drastically reduce their sugar intake. And that's because sugar I can't even call it a food, really, as a substance we eat, is extremely pro-inflammatory. It causes inflammation in the body. Now, the two main killers, well, I guess three, the two main killers of Canadians today, it's heart disease and it's cancer. And I would probably throw in diabetes as well. Mm-hmm. And we now recognize that both cancer and heart disease, one of the underlying causes of these conditions is inflammation. So, if you were to eliminate sugar from your diet or drastically reduce it, you then reduce the amount of inflammation in your body, and therefore you will protect yourself or at least decrease your chances of developing these two killers, heart disease and cancer. But not only that, I think with diabetes, it's pretty self-evident why you need to cut sugar out of your diet.
Yeah.
But, all sorts of, think of all the conditions where you have inflammation, like anything that ends in itis, like arthritis, bronchitis, colitis. All sorts of digestive issues do improve when you eliminate sugar. And for most people, the most common digestive issues would be just generalized bloating, flatulence, but also, think about reflux, like indigestion, to really severe conditions such as inflammatory bowel disease or its lesser cousin, irritable bowel syndrome. All of these improve when you start to reduce or eliminate sugar from your diet, But, I have a special interest in the treatment of anxiety and depression. These two mood conditions are absolutely aggravated when you have a lot of sugar in your diet. And I dare say excess sugar consumption can even bring on those conditions. I just know for myself, because there are times of the year when I do consume sugar, during the Christmas holidays, maybe around Thanksgiving, etc. What I do find is all my aches and pains start to come back, the low back rheumatiz, but also I get more kind of depressed and more even anxious, during that time. I mean, and I'm aware that that's what's causing it, right? But
okay, but I do have a question. Now, you had talked about the white substance. What about raw sugar? What about brown sugar?
Yeah.
Are they substitutes that are safer to use?
Well, I would say no, but I mean, brown sugar, most of the brown sugar we get is just white sugar that's had molasses added to it. So I suppose there's a minimal amount of nutrients from the molasses. Raw sugar, I mean, in its raw form, it does have a bit of nutritional value. But I guess the thing is, my concern is that it still feeds into the addiction to sweet, the addiction to sugar. And I mean, some alternatives that I find can be helpful for some people is, I've always liked the herb stevia. Now, a lot of people know what stevia is now, but, I was recommending it.
For those that don't.
Well, stevia, it's actually a herb that's indigenous to South America. Like when I was in Peru a couple of months ago, like stevia was added to most things to improve the sweetness. And if you've ever chewed a leaf from the herb stevia, it's intensely sweet. So these days you can get sort of derivatives like stevia. In a way, it's processed, but you need such a small amount in order to get the same amount of sweetness. Some people like the different sort of like maltitol and erythritol, which are derived from woods, I believe, sugars that are derived from woods. So they're kind of natural sugars that don't seem to have the same effect on our blood sugars as sugar, or all the different forms of sugar, whether it's syrups or honey or raw sugar, etc. So I mean, it's hard. Well, let me put it this way: when you quit sugar, it takes a good 4 days for the cravings to calm down. Generally, when you have cravings, I recommend things like maybe having a spoonful of fat in the form of like coconut butter or almond butter or unprocessed peanut butter. Sometimes that fat and protein can help, or maybe even having like a hard-boiled egg, like protein. Generally, that's what your body is kind of craving for, but it gets all perverted, when we consume sugar, because we were not. Our bodies aren't naturally. Yeah, we it was only in the last couple of 100 years that refined sugar actually came into our diet. Now we do have sweet taste buds, mother's milk is on the sweet side, so it is normal for us to want sweets, but usually we would get them from fruits or more starchy vegetables and grains, so, but the highly refined stuff, I think really causes more harm than good.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that you had mentioned with the sugar was arthritis. And as we get older, and quite a few young people that have it, but it is something that a lot of people do suffer from. And now, is it nightshade vegetables, the nightshade family,
Yes.
good for arthritis either?
There seems to be a link with, well, technically they're fruits from the nightshade family, like your tomatoes, your eggplant, zucchini, even potatoes are in the nightshade family. And they contain substances that in certain people who are susceptible, it triggers inflammation in the body. Yeah. So I mean, one could go crazy eliminating everything from their diet. And I mean, I don't think you need to be that extreme. Having said that, I've been doing a ketogenic diet and a ketovore diet for the last 5-6 years. And well, I mean, so in a ketogenic diet, it's a high fat, moderate protein, very low carb. So you want to keep your carb intake. So your carbohydrates come from grains, from fruits, from anything with sugar in it, and from starchy vegetables. And, you know, I try to keep my carb intake to about 25 grams to 30 grams a day. So to give you an idea how much that is, a slice of wheat bread is about 24 grams of carbohydrates.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So all your low carb all your green vegetables have virtually, you know, are significantly low in carbohydrates. But I mean, what I found for me, and it was just me and even a few of my patients, you know, I've had some patients reverse their diabetes, type 2 diabetes, by doing ketogenic. Both my parents, well before they were my age, and I'm well into my 60s, both of them were diabetics by the time they're my age. And of course, I'm not. And I attribute that to diet and lifestyle. I mean, both my parents were addicted to sugar too, because, you know, they were English. Not that, you know, I mean, they all know.
My dad was English. I'm Scottish, but
yeah.
I've got that English influence. I can just blame it on my dad.
Yeah.
And we were actually, Melissa and I, we were talking about my dad just last week, when the way he put sugar.
Yes.
Oh boy, did he have a sweet tooth. And his coffee, he would take the sugar container, like they had the one home that you just pour it out of. He'd hold the spoon over the teacup and just hold it and dump the sugar in. And he'd do about 4 teaspoons of sugar, plus whatever else fell in there.
You know, I remember as a kid, we used to have a sugar bowl that was always on the kitchen table.
Yeah.
You know, to put your sugar in your tea or your coffee, in your cereal, even the sweetened cereal, we would sprinkle sugar. Oh my God. When I think back to how much sugar we all consumed. But, you know, another thing to consider about sugar intake as well is that, you know, a study was done that, you know, they were looking at white blood cells in a petri dish. Now, your white blood cells, they're a main part of your immune system. They're the white blood cells that gobble up bacteria. They're called macrophages. And what they found is when these white blood cells were exposed to just a little bit of sugar, like a sugar water, which to a person would be the equivalent of 1 or 2 teaspoons of sugar, these white blood cells basically went dormant. They stopped functioning for a good several hours afterwards. So when you think about it, kids tend to get infections or become sick, usually around Halloween, Christmas, Valentine's Day, Easter, or birthdays. And that's because those are the times typically their sugar intake absolutely skyrockets. Yeah. So if you get any kind of a recurrent infection, you know, I mean, really, you shouldn't have more than maybe one infection, whether it's a respiratory infection, bladder infection, skin infection, what have you. You shouldn't have it more than maybe once a year. Any more than that, that's too many. And so if you have any, and I would even call skin infections, you know, like acne, etc., a lot of these conditions, you know, will resolve when you stop the sugar, or at least cut it out.
Okay.
Like either cut it out completely or greatly reduce it. I mean, as I said, we're a society of sugar addicts, so it's really hard to cut it out completely without everybody becoming somewhat homicidal. And that's never good. But, it's something that, just to be mindful of.
Yeah. Now, you talk about skin infections. This flesh-eating disease.
Gosh, yeah.
Now,
well, that is a scary condition. And I would suggest that, this is an immune system that's not working, right? And, I would, and maybe, medical doctors would disagree with me, but, to me, when someone has an infectious condition that's run rampant, either septicemia, which is, your blood, the infection is spread everywhere, or something as severe as flesh-eating disease, to me, what's happening is you have an immune system that's not functioning properly. Either, it doesn't have enough nutritional support to function optimally, or maybe because of other insults, it's gone into overdrive. So it's hyper functioning, and so again, things like that, I would look at, well, how is their immune system? I mean, how is their vitamin D status? I mean, that is one of, there's been so much wonderful research on vitamin D in the last, I would say 10 years, even still continues to happen. And, vitamin D, I mean, I get all my patients during the beginning of the cold and flu season in September, October, to really bump up their vitamin D. Because, those of us who are outside a lot in the summer, we get, vitamin D naturally from the sun. And that's, if you wear a lot of sunscreen, sometimes you inhibit the absorption of vitamin D. Correct. But, a lot of us have, massive levels of our vitamin D levels get replenished if we're outside a lot during the summer. And they start to gradually decrease because once the cold weather hits, we're usually inside more. And usually by about October, November, our levels are either insufficient or deficient. And isn't it interesting? That's typically when the cold and flu season starts. So one way, I believe, of keeping your immunity strong is to maintain relatively high levels of vitamin D throughout the year, or especially sort of from October to April during the cold and flu season. Yeah.
Now and I'm going to say with the cold and flu season coming up, because we're halfway through August now, so we are moving into that direction. Too quick for some and not quick enough for others.
That's so true.
But what are your thoughts on oil of oregano during that time?
Oil of oregano has really powerful, microbial fighting powers, right? I don't know, take this for what it's worth. I did just briefly read an article indicating that the oil of oregano may be helpful as an adjunct treatment for various cancers. Now, I mean, I'd have to do a lot more research on that, but I do know that a lot of people, especially when you have, I like using oil of oregano, not preventively, but more as a treatment. If you have any kind of microbial infection, that can include any of your viral infections, that can definitely bacterial infections, yeast infections, fungi, parasitic infections, apparently seem to work well when you take oil of oregano. And, you don't need a lot. You only need maybe a couple of drops. Keep in mind when you take any kind of an essential oil, It's like one drop is almost like the equivalent of 40 cups of the herb itself as a herbal tea. So, it's extremely concentrated. So, you just need to be mindful of when you're taking any kind of essential oil orally, just to be mindful of keeping it at a relatively low dose because it's very powerful.
Yeah. Now, there are some essential oils that, from what I understand, and this is something that I learned a long time ago, quite a few years back, that there are some essential oils that you shouldn't take orally anyway.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, they're extremely concentrated, right? And they, with any kind of substance, we have what we call a therapeutic window. And many pharmaceuticals have a very narrow therapeutic window, meaning the difference between a treatment dose and an overdose is very narrow. With most herbs and that, they have a very wide therapeutic index, meaning you can take a lot before you start to have possible adverse reactions. But, essential oils, they're, very narrow therapeutic index because they are so strong. So you just have to be careful. And, there are many that you should never take orally.
Yeah. So, for anyone out there who is thinking about taking essential oils for anything, before you do, you really should check with a naturopathic doctor. Yeah. So, Colette, with that, what is your contact information?
Okay, well, I used to have a professional page on Facebook, Colette Harman, naturopathic doctor. It's sort of fallen into disuse, but I am on Facebook as Colette Harman, so I think you can see the correct spelling of my name. ColetteHarman. And I'm also at the Kincardine Holistic Health Center here in Kincardine. And I could give you the phone number for that. It's 519-396-4018. That's 396-4018. You can also reach me by email, which is my name, ColetteHarman9@gmail.com. Not because there's 8 other Colette Harmans in the world, but because I like the number 9. And it's like when I used to have a TNT account, right? Email account. And when they closed it down, I had to come up with a new email address off the top of my head. So that's where ColetteHarman9@gmail.com came.
Okay.
Yes.
And, one of the things that you had mentioned, and I do want to spend quite a bit of time talking about this, is anxiety and depression. Now, you were saying how white sugar can bring this on. Obviously, it's not just sugar that causes this with us. There are so many other things. Now, you do workshops for this, is that correct? Or you will?
Yes. Well, it's, prior to the pandemic, and it's hard to believe that was just over 4 years ago when it all started, right?
Yeah.
It's like this black vortex in my past. Anyway, and so up for a couple of years, up until 2020, I was, doing these anxiety and depression workshops, 6 simple steps to effectively cope, off and on throughout, the years. And, so it's 6 simple steps. So we would meet for 6 weeks, for 1 hour for 6 weeks. And I would discuss basically a mindfulness technique, because a lot of people, like, psychotherapists, psychologists, etc., realize that what can really help with coping with anxiety and its evil sister, depression, is developing tools, these mindfulness techniques. So what we do is we meet for 1 hour, over each week for 6 weeks, and I will discuss or share a mindfulness technique to help. And then everybody practices it for the week, and then they come back the next week and give us all feedback. I mean, so I do several mindfulness techniques, but I also discuss diet, how diet affects your mood, And when people say, well, how can what I eat affect how I feel? I think, well, do you ever notice that your mood changes when you have alcohol?
Yeah.
And so, even just being aware that the foods you eat, and, typically it tends to be the foods we tend to crave the most, tend to have the most adverse effects on us. I mean, I'm always about trying to keep the diet clean, like, free from ultra processed foods, get good vegetables into your diet, drink sufficient water, like, that makes a difference. And so, I do, discuss things that can really help with mood, and, even to the point of saying, eat more fat. Fat makes us feel better. And, we've been kind of going through this sort of fat phobic approach to eating for the last, 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
I mean, and but the thing is, we need fats in our diet. They're an essential part of a lot of the hormones we produce, a lot of the immune substances we create in the body, and fat helps our moods.
It does. I remember years ago, I went on, it was a fat-free diet.
Yes.
And boy, did it ever screw up my body.
It
things up.
I know it was a big push, maybe like when I first became a naturopath and when I first got into practice, I think almost 35 years ago, when I graduated when I was 12.
Yeah.
Oh my God, next year I will have been in practice for 35 years. So I have a little bit of experience under my belt, but back at that time, so that would be around 1990, there was a lot of promotion of low-fat diets, fat-free diets, and it really kind of I think it was considered good for cardiac health. If anything, it aggravated people's health. It made, it really messed up their hormones. It messed up, immune stuff, cardiac stuff. Yeah. And as a result, people started consuming these so-called fat-free foods. But fat gives flavor. So what did they replace it with? High carbs.
Salt or sugar.
Lots of sugar. And so if anything, it probably catapulted the obesity epidemic, which I would say started about 30 odd years ago.
Now, with fats, you hear about different types of fats. There was trans fats, there's healthy fats. I don't know which.
Well, trans fats are basically artificial fats. So, like your margarine, shortening, it's, anything, that's derived from oils, especially seed oils that normally would be liquid at room temperature, but if they're solid, that means they've been hydrogenated, which means they've had a lot of hydrogen added to it in order to make it solid. And these become what they call trans fats, so a trans fat is, if you think about it this way, a normal fat would have a bond, and the little hydroxide bonds would be on the same side of the bond. That's called cis. That's a cis fat. So you see, and then, but with artificial ones, somehow it goes into a reverse, so that the OH hydroxide molecules are on opposite sides of the bond. And the problem is the body can't metabolize it properly because it's an artificial fat. Yeah, so I mean, how we use the term transsexual and cissexual? It comes from organic chemistry, where trans is when it's on the, the opposite.
Yeah.
This is when it's on the same. So Yeah.
So it's trans fats that you want to avoid.
You want to avoid trans fats. So basically, it's all processed fats, which is basically the fats that are used in any kind of ultra processed foods. It's definitely margarine. And yes, that includes Basil. I don't know. Everybody asks me that. Well, what about Basil? What about Basil? It's margarine. So unfortunately for those who are vegans, it also means much of the fats they use as butter replacements, would contain trans fats. Yeah. And that includes shortening. You're better to use lard rather than shortening. You're better to use butter rather than margarine. Yep. It's I think there's been a real shift in the whole concept of fats and realizing that saturated fats may be, dare I say, better for you.
Yeah. Anyway, Colette, we're going to take a short break.
Yep.
And when we come back, we can continue talking about that too. But I also want to talk more about your workshop that you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. So don't go far. We'll be back.
I'm a singer-songwriter from Six Nations, and I've been writing songs about my experience. And with that being said, it's helped me hold hope in my heart in following my dreams and being resilient to everyday Indigenous battles. Competition between spirit, earth, and wind, let me tell you now. This song in particular, The Shiner, is a special song that I wrote for my grandfather. He was a snow snake maker, and that is a Haudenosaunee winter sport. It's my job to educate and to share, and the music allows me to do that. He'll be shining snow snakes and mudcats to the end of his days.
With Rogers TV, you can cheer on the home team from the comfort of your living room. We'll head to the rink, the field, the court, or the pitch, so you don't have to. Tune in and cheer on your local amateur athletes on Rogers TV.
And welcome back. All right, let's get back on this topic of fats, because like I say, I know myself, my weight, I'm up and down, and you hear one thing, and then you hear another thing, and I have been, the last couple of months, I've been eating a lot of fruit, thinking I'm doing really good. I'm staying away from carbs. And then today you come out and say, oh yeah, fruit, that's carbs. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, it's
hard. It's tough to know.
This is just my personal opinion based on, almost 35 years of professional experience and my own experience. I think a lot of us, as we reach middle age and older, develop a carbohydrate intolerance. I mean, I'm convinced for most people of a certain age, it's carbohydrates. So that's your grains and fruit and starchy vegetables. That's what puts on weight for us, because it really can throw us into what we call insulin resistance, and can contribute to blood sugar imbalances. And okay, so in Japan, the Japanese people as a rule tend to be very slight. They're small, but the sumo wrestlers, they're massive. And you know what they do? They just eat tons and tons of white rice. They just overconsume white rice. And that's how they build up fats and muscle. Fat, right? So I think a lot of what's causing a lot of obesity in people these days is consumption of excess consumption of carbohydrates, especially refined carbohydrates. I mean, and because everybody is addicted to carbs, especially sugar, it's really, really challenging, right? So people will think they're doing really well I have a banana in the morning and I have this and I have that, banana and berries. Well, one banana is about 30 grams of carbohydrates, right? So
Ooh,
that's already, if
yeah.
you were on a ketogenic type of diet, that's already your
Okay.
daily allowance, right?
Yeah. Now, this may be a really silly question. Okay. I'll admit it. Okay. So one of the things that you hear is that sweet potatoes are healthier for you than regular potatoes. Is that
Yeah.
true, or is that
Well, that's base. Yeah, that's base. Well, it has, sweet potatoes do have a lot of nutrition, but it's also based on a measurement called the glycemic index. So sweet potatoes versus white potatoes. So sweet potatoes have a lower glycemic index compared to white potatoes.
Okay.
What that means is that the sugar, the carbohydrates in the sweet potato gets absorbed more slowly than in a white potato. So you have a gradual increase in your blood sugar levels versus a white potato, which in some people who are susceptible can cause a big increase in your blood sugar and then the resultant drop as well. So, and sometimes when your blood sugars tend to increase and then suddenly drop, that's what can kick in the cravings for carbs or sugars. So, I mean, for some people, the only way they can lose weight and get healthy is to really drastically reduce their carbohydrate intake. Or they could do, they can cycle their carbs, meaning they could do kind of a ketogenic type of diet, like really low carbs for 5 days, and then do really high carbs for 1 day, and then do another 5 days of low carbs and another.
Okay, but doesn't
For some people that can help, that can work.
Yeah,
know?
but wouldn't that confuse your body?
Well, in some people, yes, and others, no. It's, there's no one right diet for everyone. I mean, some people some people thrive on a vegan diet. And I did a vegan diet for a few years, and I didn't realize how bad I felt until I had, and so my gateway meat was a hot dog. I walked past, I was at the CNE in Toronto. I walked past a hot dog stand and the aroma was so overwhelming. I couldn't stop myself. And after having one of the worst types of protein you can have, that hot dog, suddenly I felt so much better. Yeah. So I know, I've known many people to find that after being on a vegan diet for several years, they actually feel good initially. And that's often because they're off the crap foods that we always eat, right? But over time, especially in women, they start to have hormonal issues. Maybe they're starting to skip periods, etc. Maybe men and women will start to get skin issues, digestive issues. So, and you've got to realize a vegan diet where you have a combination of your legumes, your beans, peas, and lentils, and your grains in order to, combine to make a good protein. So, a lot of carbs in that diet for some people. And if you happen to have that carbohydrate intolerance, it actually can aggravate. In carbohydrate intolerance, it can actually aggravate your health. Yeah. I know I'm probably telling you stuff that's almost sounds heretic, like heretical.
Yeah, but it makes sense.
I'm a heretic. I'm a food heretic.
Yeah, but it makes sense, Colette. So maybe I'm one too. Now, I want to go back to the sugar with anxiety.
Yeah.
How is it connected with anxiety and depression?
Yeah. Well, again, it's how it affects your blood sugar. I mean, a lot of people when especially if they're on the depression, the sugar at first, we all feel good when we eat sugar because our blood sugar increases. Yeah. It's just when it plummets, like within half an hour afterwards, they get the sugar crash that, it's usually one can feel depressed. and or anxious. And I mean, it's now recognized that certain mood disorders like anxiety and depression do have an inflammatory component to it. So maybe a bit of the nervous system goes into an inflamed state, and that will affect the production of the happy hormones, the neurotransmitters in the brain. So, you know, sugar will definitely affect that. It's like, you know, think of alcohol. Alcohol is a highly refined carbohydrate, as is sugar. And, you know, a lot of people, when they drink, can feel quite good when they've got a bit of a buzz on, but then afterwards can experience a bit of kind of a bit of depression, you know, or just feeling angsty. Now, the thing is with sugar too, and this will tie into the anxiety, sugar has a bit of a stimulating effect and it can cause certain hormones like cortisols and everything to be increased in the body. And that can be perceived as anxiety, you know, and, you know, especially if it seems to come out of nowhere. You know, these highly refined foods can definitely contribute to anxiety and depression. And also, you know, you're not getting any nutrition, but it's like when you're in that, and I've had both anxiety and depression in my life, so I can speak to it from a personal perspective as well as from a professional perspective, you know, and because of my own personal experience professionally, I now know what I need to do to never have depression come back into my life again. Because I've had probably in my lifetime, over the course of maybe 30, 40 years, maybe three bouts of depression that lasted more than like a few months, you know, lasted about a year or so. And, you know, so now I know what I need to do to prevent that. I mean, I now recognize that my diet will definitely contributed to the moods. You know, I have this theory. I mean, I come from an Irish background, Irish Catholic background, and, you know, the Irish, well, we know that alcoholism seems to be seen to a high degree in people from an Irish ancestry. And I blame potatoes. Oh. And I'll tell you why. So I don't know if you're aware that potatoes are indigenous to South America. They are not a natural crop in Europe at all.
Oh, but I didn't know that.
Yeah, but they were a cheap food that was relatively easy to grow. And so, you know, all the explorers brought back potatoes and people started growing them. And of course, you know, in Ireland, they talk about the famous potato blight, right? It's because there was no potatoes were not indigenous to that land and had no natural protection, you know, as a food. Anyway, I blame potatoes because here we have this group of genetically similar people who started consuming this very high carbohydrate food that genetically they were not really able to metabolize properly. And I think that could be part of triggering the cravings for this, you know, because, you know, they often would make poutine, which is the liquor derived from potatoes, like vodka. And I think what happened is, you know, it was like, you know, these are people who genetically didn't have the ability to properly digest and metabolize this particular food, but then it became a staple in their diet and could have created the so-called allergy or cravings that we now see as sugar cravings, carb cravings, alcohol cravings. That's just my theory, because a lot of people don't realize that potatoes are not indigenous to Europe. They're indigenous to South America.
And I didn't know that either.
Yeah. Yeah. So you learn things with me, Lynn.
Oh, I do. And it just goes to prove you're never too old to learn something new.
Oh, for sure. Well, I was in Peru 4 months ago, and like they have like 300 different types of potatoes because that's where that's where they come from, you know?
Yeah. Well, one time I got some purple potatoes.
Yes.
But Russ wouldn't eat them because of the color.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to say he's a fussy eater, but
I know, funny foods, right? I mean, hopefully that gives you an idea of how the foods we eat can affect our moods. And I think, a lot of, parents with hyperactive kids know that when they reduce the sugar intake in these kids, it helps them calm down and focus, right?
Years ago, and this was when I lived down in the Niagara area, so it was a long time ago. One of my clients, her son had the ADHD, like very hyper. Yeah. And he was really, really severe with it to the point that he actually got hold of a kitchen knife and he attacked his mom with a kitchen knife, went after her with it. And she was able to control it in a sense through food.
Yes.
And and I can't remember, like anything that was yellow or orange, he couldn't have. So he couldn't have cheddar, like orange cheese. Different colored foods he couldn't have.
The dyes.
Absolutely no hot dogs or anything like that. It all had to be real food, not processed food.
Yes.
And it can make a difference on them.
Well, anybody who's ever had blood sugar fluctuations like hypoglycemia know that, when people get cranky and irritable, like your kids get cranky and irritable, you kind of know it's time for them to eat.
Yeah.
Or, if you have a spouse, when our blood sugars drop, we can also get kind of cranky, right? So keeping the blood sugars level all the time, and, fats do that, protein does that, high fiber does that. It's all about keeping your blood sugar in that happy range, literally.
Yeah. And with the anxiety and the depression, I think the way things are in the world today, that adds to it.
Oh, absolutely.
So people are so stressed.
Yeah. I improved my mood just by getting rid of my TV and stopping listening to the news.
Yeah. It's all based on fear.
It is.
It really is. And I think that it's important to be aware of what is going on, but the truth about what's going on, and not feed into the fear aspect of it.
Yeah. You know what I now use as a standard of when I listen to something, whether it's news or people speaking about something, if it incites my fear, anxiety, if it incites my hatred, or if it incites my hopelessness and despair, I know I'm being manipulated, and I release it. I pay no further attention to it. On the other hand, if it makes me laugh with joy, or if it gives me some powerful insight into truth and reality, then I kind of pay attention to it. That's kind of the template I use.
Yeah.
And if you listen to something and you feel more angry, more fearful, or more hopeless, let it go.
Yeah. Same on Facebook. You see these posts that are instilling fear, separation, anger, scroll past them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about manipulation and control.
Oh, God.
I refuse to be manipulated and controlled.
Yeah.
Chances are, there are still things that maybe I'm not quite aware of, but I would say in the last sort of 4 or 5 years, I've done a complete 180 in many things I believe to be true. And now I question everything, even things I was trained in, you know? So,
Yeah.
but I mean, and I think that's a healthy state to be, is to exercise discernment,
Yeah.
question everything. I mean, I love it when patients come to me and question my recommendations until the point where I get a bit annoyed. No,
Yeah.
that's just me. No, I mean, I welcome people's questions because, you know, I like to think I'm pretty thorough and how I explain why I recommend doing what they're doing. But, you know, people come up with good questions, or maybe they hear something on the interwebs and they say, what do you think of this? And, you know, I give them my best educated guess. But
Yeah.
in the end, people have to do what, you know, resonates with them, you know?
Yeah, you do. You do. You have to go with what feels right. And I know that you have given me that advice in the past when I have asked you, phoned you, Colette, I'm feeling this. What do I do? And you seem to have this stock answer with me, and it's always, Lynn, if someone else came to you with this, what would you tell them?
Yeah.
Like, trust your instincts. All right, then, listen to yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've been programmed not to trust our inner wisdom.
I think so.
I think there's a lot of programming that I recognize I've been programmed in so many things, and I'm really working to let it go, to deprogram myself, you know?
And I think we all have. And, you know, in school, the kids, they're not taught how to think. They're taught what to think.
Yes.
My first husband, he went to Ryerson college, I think it is, or university. Anyway, he went to Ryerson and he took an English class, and they were given a poem and they had to put down what the poem was about. Well, one of the students, and the teacher didn't know this, it was his uncle who actually wrote the poem.
No.
Yeah, so he knew what it was about, and he spoke to his uncle, so he got it right from the poem, right from the author. So anyway, he put down, you know, what he knew from his uncle, and he failed because it is not what the teacher. It wasn't. Was not the meaning that was in the book, like the teacher had, that was in their curriculum, and the teacher told him it was wrong. And he went up to the teacher and he said, excuse me, you know, like, why did I fail this? And when he was told this, he said, well, no, because the person who wrote it is my uncle. And I know for a fact that this is what he meant. But see, and the teacher wasn't willing to accept it. So when you talk about being programmed and being taught what to think, not how to think, that right there really is a prime example.
Yeah. You know, we should live in a society where we're given all different points of view on all different subjects. And not, I mean, we have, I think, way too much censorship. So it can be challenging sometimes to make a thoughtful decision.
It can be. And it's there, you have to be, especially today's age, you have to be so careful what you say.
Yeah.
And how you say it.
Yeah.
And anybody who thinks that we have freedom of speech, you got your head buried in the sand.
I agree. Do you ever find yourself with friends or people you're not quite sure of kind of talking in code? And if they get
absolutely.
it, you know, like
absolutely.
I remember about 40 years ago meeting a couple who were refugees from, I think it was Guatemala or no, it was El Salvador, and how they had to be so careful how they talk to each other, like in a restaurant or anywhere in public, because
Yeah.
they could be arrested. And
Yeah.
I thought, oh my God, what a horrible place to live. And yet I kind of
Here we
find
are.
myself in the same
Here we are.
kind of boat, being just careful what I say on, on Facebook, even what I write, because, I mean, a lot of people are easily offended these days, and
They really are.
and I mean, there's a part of me that says that, wants to be mindful,
Mm-hmm.
the whole being politically correct, which made sense about 30, 40 years ago, but now has gone to such an extreme that,
Yeah.
you could step into a quagmire completely unintentionally, and, World War III is breaking out.
Yeah. Well, it's funny with clients that come to see me. Sometimes, like, they'll sort of start tiptoeing around on something because they don't know where I stand. And then they sit and they look at the expression on my face. And, it's that thing, well, if the words don't say it, that's okay. My face will. And they sit there and they'll start laughing. It's okay. We know where you stand on it then. So, and then they speak freely.
Yes.
And I think that being able to do that is important, because I mean, especially coming for a reading, right? And
yes,
and going to see a doctor, you need to be able to speak freely to say, okay, this is what my problem is. This is how I feel about this.
Yeah. And one of the problems, like in my licensing board, and I would say even medical doctors, their licensing boards, we have been forbidden to speak on certain issues.
Yes.
So we can't even speak truthfully. I mean, medical doctors have this as well. Like we are. I mean, I don't know if you know Jordan Peterson, but he was just, he was facing sanctions from his licensing board over things he spoke of.
Yeah.
Completely unrelated to his profession, I mean, and that's just, that's just, I mean, and he took it to the courts and the courts agreed with the licensing board. So,
but anyway, Colette,
anyway,
we've come to an end.
Oh dear, we just felt like we just started.
Hour goes so fast when we're together. So again, I would like to thank you very, very much. And I'm sure Mark will put up your information again.
Mm-hmm.
And
yes.
So people can see it. And as always, I really do enjoy having you on the show. And I do learn new things from you every time.
Oh, that's so good. And I always thank you so much, Lynn, for giving me the opportunities to speak. I always find our chats really engaging and informative. And thank you.
All right. So I hope everyone else enjoyed as much as I did. And see you the next time. And in the meantime, drive carefully. And remember, always keep laughter in your heart.
Connect with us by visiting our website or email us at comments@rogerstv.com.
Hi, I'm Vivica Gravel, Community Development Coordinator with the City of Owen Sound and the River District. And welcome to My River District. This is a show where every week we'll be here at Rogers Studios talking to you and talking to local businesses and people in the community about why they, as locals, love it here. They'll also share some stories about their businesses and how they can help you. So meet us here every week, Rogers TV, for the whole season of My River District.
This pitching clinic so far.
I'm Kevin Gosman, and this is the art of pitching.
Knew we had a plan.
catcher, pitching coach, and I talked about before.
Just attack guys from pitch one.
Huge strikeout.
When it comes like body language of the hitter, it's more so like how aggressive they are.
He is some kind of locked in right now.
You look at if they move or try to get closer to the plate, the more that I can keep the pressure on them, they can't get in the rhythm.
He understands the art of pitching.